Good morning to everyone, and especially to my panelists. The good news is that this session will be recorded and Pro.Bono.org will distribute it via the Zoom link. So we will all see that our networks will receive this. There's also a video pre-recorded and placed on Pro.Bono.org's website about bullying and how mediation can address that very successful. I would like to start by introducing myself. I'm Elsie Steenhuisen, I'm an advocate, and I'm responsible for the Children's Project at Pro.Bono.org, and we need to make use of mediation very often. But we find that the public is not knowledgeable about it and they don't trust this process. So today we're going to spend time on that. Advocate J.P. Witz will start and give us an introduction. Then Advocate Zola Krumalu will explain to you her experiences working at the Family Advocate's Office as well as in her private practice. Then Reverend Leon Forsman will talk about restorative justice. And then we've got a very special guest here as well, Dr. Busi Majola. Oh yes, see, Busi Majola, thank you. And she will also give input on the whole process, and we will have questions and answers and discussions. So welcome to everybody, and I'm going to give the floor to JP.
Thank you, Elsie. Yes, what is mediation? Mediation is firstly a process, and it forms part of the bigger legal processes in South Africa, where we find we have a mediator who is an impartial person who assists and facilitates discussions and negotiations between two parties to reach a mutually beneficial solution. As mediators, we promote mediation and we say, why litigate if you can mediate? So the traditional, almost default setting that people have is when they have a problem, then they would go to an attorney to assist them to resolve whatever issue it might be. And then we have lawyers in court fighting it out, and it's a battle of wits, and it's a win-lose situation. Whereas in litigation, we assist parties to find the best solutions for them. Especially if you look at family mediation. Families know their circumstances best. And in a facilitated process, which is confidential and without prejudice, which means that the mediator can create a safe environment for the parties to put everything on the table so that the unique practical solution which will fit that specific family or the parties can be reached at the end of the day. So we work towards a win-win-win scenario and not a win-lose as you would find in a traditional court setting.
Have you also found that people are so used to their own arguments and repeating it and they can't get anywhere, but the mediator helps them to look at different solutions?
Absolutely, and that is why it's important to understand that mediation is a process. And as we go through the different stages of the mediation process, we often see, and it's amazing to see that aha moment kick in, and to see how people actually shift from fighting and I'm right and you are wrong to saying, okay, wait, there is another perspective. There is another point of view, and that is why you have that point of view, and let's work collaboratively to find the best possible solution for our unique situation.
Have you also found that the mediator encouraged the people to participate in the process and not find an end solution now, but at least to improve the situation and working towards a better point and hopefully a solution at the end.
Absolutely. Mediation, well, you have different time frames. Sometimes some people can move faster, and a professionally trained and accredited mediator knows how to read the situation and guide the parties. So sometimes we go slow to go fast, and at other times we can go fast to go slow. But mediation is always future focused. So we acknowledge what happened in the past and we deal with that and we unpack that, and then we move forward. We absolutely guide and help the parties to change their point of view in terms of let's move forward, let's create a better future for everybody concerned. And in that process, there's a lot of healing that starts to take place on a subconscious level.
Thank you. I know some mediators also make use of the de bono thinking caps, the yellow and the black being very negative, and then I think the yellow is to create solutions and a very positive stage.
Finding unique solutions is a critical part of the mediation process. And once parties have moved past unpacking the hurt and the problems and the issues that they have, and you sit down with them and you really start to brainstorm new solutions. A friend of mine has a very nice clip where she demonstrates this visually, how mediation can load unique solutions. And you can see them starting to think outside of the box, thinking future, thinking from a different perspective, whether it's the balcony perspective, whether it's from the perspective of the child or the other party around the table. When those unique solutions start to come out, and you can actually, sometimes you can't stop them. They're like just throwing it out there.
That's great. Now, if you're happy, I can move over to Advocate Zola. I would like you to tell us about your experience and that mediation really worked. Let's start at the family advocate, because then you've got time, but you are inundated with cases. Am I right?
Yes, you are correct. With my experience as a family advocate, I dealt with a lot of mediation between the divorcing parties, or either couples that are not married, or they were cohabitating, or boyfriend-girlfriend issues. More especially when they are minor children, that is the focus, because the children are protected by our constitution and their rights are protected. So what we look at the most is the best interest of the child. In the mediation process, we try and get the parties that are in dispute to resolve how they are going to take care of the children, who's going to have the rights to primary residence of the children, and contact and care of the children, like maintenance and all that. And it is important to understand that all parental rights are according to both parents. Then it depends on the situation of the dispute, and there's a couple of things that the Act has laid down that you need to look at in order to come to a conclusion on who should take primary residence. But you may not deprive the other party, depending on the situation. The matters are so different, like the other parties will come and find that the other one is a druggist, so you cannot let that person look after the children, especially the minor children, but still that person has a right to contact, to actually see his children. And if the person has got financial means, has the right to care for the children. So there are a lot of scenarios that we actually will mediate on. Some minor children, the dispute will be over the third parties, where maybe both parents have died and the children are minor. And now you find paternal and maternal relatives fighting over who's got the rights to take the children, to take care. But you find that mostly what drives that dispute in those scenarios is the financial implications, like the estates, assets of the children and all that. So each side wants to fight over the estate of the monies, like most especially if there's a provident fund, if the parents are working, or pension fund. So we actually then try and resolve those disputes and make a decision on who should take primary residence. But in that, you don't do it alone as a family advocate. You actually get the parties, parents involved. You mediate, you drive them to achieve a common ground. You drive them to agree and to settle on how these minor children are going to be raised, who should take care of them. And you find that some other parties, their conflict is very gruesome, such that the other one doesn't want the other one to see the children and all those things. So you need to make arrangements and get them to settle that they are both equally parents. They both equally have the rights over their children. They both have responsibility to sign or give consent if their children are going to get married as minors, or if they're going to travel abroad. And they both have to be, taking decisions over the children. So when you get these fighting parents to actually settle on these things, you need to actually take them step by step, teaching them on why is it important to take the best interest of the child. The child would love both parents, irrespective of who is at fault or whatever. The minor children, they love their parents. They don't look at the character of the parents. For them, the parent is a parent. So that is why it is important that in mediation, to resolve the situation such that the child does not lose one of the parents completely. They both have to have contact. They both have that responsibility to take care, to ensure that they pay for whatever is necessary for the children. And yeah.
Thank you very much. Have you also found that the term primary residence, a part that it's not even mentioned in the Children's Act or in the Bill of Rights pertaining to children, once we explain to parents that it is not the parent's right to have the child most of the time, it is where it be the best for the child to be most of the time, because not of the parent, but of the circumstances, like going to school, aftercare, activities at school as well, Saturday activities, Sunday school, religion. And then we found that that parent who insisted on primary residence understands it better because they think it's their right.
And ultimately, as I have stated, that both parents have equal rights. They are both entitled to actually look after their own children. But then when we mediate, we look at the circumstances. There's a lot that we look at. It's not really only on the affordability, the circumstances of the people. There's a lot. You look at the character, you look at the family, and you look at the child. The child gets interviewed depending on the age of the child. There are tools to interview the children so that the children also have a right to give an input on the decision on who is going to take care of the child. So that is very important to involve the child. As I said, there are tools and questions that you can pose to the child, and they are designed according to the ages of the children. So the children will have an input, and that input will also help guide the recommendations that you are going to actually come to conclude on. But as I said, you don't conclude alone. You look at those, and then you pose questions on the parents. You conduct inquiries with the parents and the child as well, separately from the parents, because the child may not be able to talk in front of the child or of the parents. So then you come to a conclusion, but you get your conclusion with input from both parents, and you drive them to a state where they agree that, okay, this is fine, the parental primary residence can be with whoever they agree upon. But what is important on that is the agreement, which we call it a parental agreement, that how often the other party who's not having a primary residence is going to be able to see children, and how those children are going to be accessed, and what times and all that. So all those, they differ per each incident, because some you find that the parental, the contact will be under supervision because of the circumstances of the parent. So he or she cannot be allowed to have the children alone without the supervision. So there's a lot that you take into account, and circumstances of the people are different. So they are always unique. They may be similar, but they are not the same. So yes, then we treat the circumstances based on the legislation in the Act guiding us according to what is relevant for those parties, and then you make them to agree on what then is on what we're discussing in that inquiry.
Can you give us an example? Because we found that one of the parents quite often is very unreasonable. How do you deal with that situation? Because that's the challenging one, hey? Or people saying, yes, it's right, we do this parental plan, but 2 weeks later, there's a blow up again.
We had that a couple of times. But what is important, we firstly teach the people about the Act, so that they understand that what we are doing is based on the Act, and it's based on our own constitution, and we tell the parents that the child as a human being also has to be treated with dignity and has got that protection under the constitution, that we need to actually follow through the Act. So we advise them that this is not really their choice entirely, because the child has her own protection over the rights. Then we guide them, we actually tell them those rights, and there are rights that are established by the Act for the unmarried father, unmarried mother, or either the divorcing parties. So there is also co-parenting. All these rights are established in the Act. Then we teach the parents, as we are guiding them in mediation, on what the Act requires them to do, so that when we negotiate and talk to them, we keep on reminding them that, look, then you cannot refuse the other party the access and the contact to his own children or to her own children. So, and then we quote the Act in the section that this section says.
And this child has to be taken somewhere else, orphanage or something. And also this mediation, if it can be taught to our social services also, so that our social services are actually cautious of what needs to be done. Because I have a feeling that there's a gap, then it becomes more fatal. Because we delegate people that are not qualified to mediate and that don't have understanding, except the fact that socially everything must be fine. But now what about the feelings of that particular individual?
Yes, for sure.
I'm making this example because I was raised by a father myself. You know, when men went out and said men are trash, I felt offended because my father was no trash, you see? And not because my mother could not afford to raise me and my siblings, but she chose to gallivant and do whatever it is that she was doing. But my father took charge to an extent that I'm always of the view that I feel very contradicted. You know, much as I am a woman and I fight for women's rights and everything, but I always say the objective when you deal with every particular issue.
I agree.
Take every issue on its merit. So now, what we do, my observation is this: there is no justification wherein we will just focus on the act. We need to re-evaluate the acts that we proclaim to be acts. What informed that act? The acts that we actually acquire informed by a particular incident, or is it the overall livelihood? Because we disadvantage people that are capable of doing something on the basis of what used to be. Remember, there has been the knowledge that mothers should stay with their children. Yes, true. But now, in terms of the numbers that are increasing of children that are committing suicide, they are residing with their mothers. And the question is, where did we go wrong? And I'm of the view that our children are being disadvantaged also of the information in terms of knowing what to do, because they feel now they must be the referee between that parent and that person that is supposedly incoming into their livelihoods, and they don't understand. And they don't know also how to relate with this new person that is supposed to be an adult and a parent. And they are assumed that, you know, their children, they must just follow. We are in 2022. One of the things that I think we need to realize is that we're in a fourth industrial revolution. So which then must inform the change in every act that we once adopted. True. Things are moving very fast, but we're losing the generation today very fast because we're relying on the acts that we adopted a long time ago.
Now it becomes very stale, and there should be renewal all the time.
Yes, and we were very stagnant. And I always say, whenever I have to be met with families or children, by the way, I'm also a president of the association that deals with school governing bodies. You see, I always sit and try and figure out which part of act must I refer to. You see, here is the situation. The child is actually fuming because that child is not satisfied where she's coming from. And she has to mingle with other children in school. Now, whatever it is that they accumulate at home, it will impact on how they behave out there.
Yes, absolutely. And I think Leon can link to that by explaining his situation of the bullying at school, because we find that it's not happening for no reason. It's coming, as you said, from the circumstances, mostly from home.
Yes, and they feel our children, or probably grandchildren, because I'm a grandmother, now feel as if they are just estates. There's nothing about them, but there's everything for them. So we need to change now how we approach usage of whatever it is that is actually meant to assist them to grow, to become better people. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Leon, let's hear your view, because as we've talked about, people want to fight because they don't know that there are other options and even better options and easier options and cheaper options. But they want something like a punishment or retribution. They want something. Can you talk about that?
Yes, thank you very much, Elsie. It's nice to be here and to present this. In the week, in the news, there was a story about South Africa being the most unequal society in the world. And when we talk about bullying, that really comes to the fore, because one of the prerequisites for bullying is that there is a big difference in social status. So children with a higher status will bully children with a lower status in life. So that plays a very big role in the whole problem of bullying. The second thing is the way we deal with it at the moment is not constructive. Because what we do is we find the culprit, we have a hearing at the school, and he gets expelled, perhaps, sometimes. What did that help the victim? And how did that help the bully to recognize what he has done? So, in that sense, I think a new approach is needed. And that new approach is using restorative justice as a way of dealing with bullies at school. Because you see, restorative justice has as its focus, it wants to repair the damage that is done. It wants to be, there must be justice as well. And it has to be fair to all the parties. So what we do is we get all the parties together. So the child that bullied, we get him in the room or her, we get the victim in the room, we get the school governing body or a teacher or whoever represents the school at that situation. And then we start mediating a solution to this problem that arises because of the bullying. So what we do is we have the victim state and say what the bullying did to her or to him. How did it affect them? Why was it so hurtful? And they get the opportunity to bring out all of those feelings that they have about being hurt through the bullying. But the bully also gets the opportunity. He gets the opportunity to listen to the victim. And he gets the opportunity to start to understand what his actions has done, how it has affected the victim. And then the school also plays a role in signing off on any agreement that we reach. So an agreement may look like the following. The victim would say, I want this person that bullied me to go for psychological help or to see a social worker. We know that bullying starts at home. So perhaps a social
So the process makes provision that the bully gets help, and perhaps even the family, which may be the root cause of this very bad behavior. Right. I would like to have an indication of time. How much time do we have? I would like to know if there are any questions. Yes.
what I've picked up is that people don't know in general. They don't know mediation. How can you get people, the broader public, to understand that there is an option of mediation and to use it? Where do they go?
Thank you.
Must I repeat that?
Yes, I think repeat it for recording purposes.
Okay, I would just like to know, how would you market mediation to the public, the broader public? Because people don't know about mediation.
Thank you. I think we've got an expert in the audience today, also from Pro Bono, Ms. Fish. If the microphone can go on her side. Thank you. Ms. Fish, you've heard the question and you know what we plan and do at Pro Bono, but it would be good to hear your perspective on marketing, such an important process.
Well, you know, Pro Bono, can you hear? Pro Bono provides free legal advice and free legal assistance to people and communities who can't afford to pay for lawyers. So mediation, therefore, is a very viable option. And we do try to publicize it. We've got a website, we've got social media, you know, and we do work with a lot of community advice officers who have clinics in communities. But it is difficult. I agree with you. It's very difficult to let people know. And also, I think there's a lot of resistance to mediation. People like fighting. Yes. They only know, oh no, we're going to court, and I'm gonna nail that guy because he's been mean to me, and you know, I want to get him. I want revenge. Yes. So it's often about revenge. But I also have a question for Leon, and that is about bullying. You know, bullying can happen. It happens in schools, and it's been happening for years. But now bullying has gone online. Now there is cyberbullying, and often it's anonymous. How do people come to? How do you track it down? How do you deal with it? Because children are killing themselves over this cyberbullying. It's like a pandemic. It is really, really serious.
I think first of all we need to inform our parents about the problems that social media can bring. I have a daughter that is 15 years old. We have now restricted her time that she's on social media. So those are ways one can deal with it. But it's very difficult to find the perpetrator in the case of cyberbullying, because they use all kinds of ways of masking who they really are. And there you need specialists, I think, in the field of computer science and so forth. But one of the things we can start doing is telling our children, helping them to understand how dangerous some of these platforms are. And if we see something happening, changes in our child, immediately stop it. So that's my answer. I don't have really a bit of an answer for how to deal with cyberbullying as such.
Thank you.
If I may add, in actual fact, I think disadvantaging a child for a few minutes on digital space does not actually assist, because there's a lot that they need to do, and you won't be monitoring that person, whether the child is reading or looking or observing how much is being said about them. What I would actually recommend is that pro bono, we must integrate yourselves into our curriculum and the policy formulation. Our education system is flawed. From the ECD up to tertiary. And when we do that, we then are actually capping something that may happen. Because if a person is cautious and conscious of how they should be behaving, no matter how hard the system, the circumstances that they are actually raised within are, they do have options. One of the things that I think we are doing now that makes now the increase, as you put it, in terms of the bullying, whether it's cyberbullying, whether it's physical bullying, whether it's whatever. In actual fact, we are putting it very nicely. We are reinventing the wheel of hatred. You know, when people grow up in a hateful society, it is no longer bullying. It is people that don't see themselves in the eyes of the other people. We are opening a gap so massive in such a manner that nobody wants to retract and actually check where are we going wrong. I'm taking this from many circumstances in our schools wherein a child has been reporting to a teacher that somebody is saying this about my parents, not themselves. Then they don't actually take it forward because it is not something that is between a child and a child. There's a third person. Now, mediation is far broader than actually internalizing it or reducing it to become something of a family household. We need our government now to smell the coffee. We want to have future leaders because whatever it is that we thought we accumulated in 1994, it seems to be going to the gallows. And I'm saying also this, there are no longer integrative programs that we do. You see, when you find there's I'm just gonna make one example that just happened recently in Randfontein. It is not students that were bullied. It is an adult teacher that is actually racist, bullying children, and actually culminating into now children that are Caucasian. I prefer people to be called Caucasian or brown because this black and white nonsense should stop. In actual fact, the language also must stop. We must change everything. How I view yourself, you are not white. I may probably be more whiter than you are. And I'm also saying who's actually having a mandate to actually inform the diction, the wedding. It starts from the wedding. If you call me a black person, how black must I be for you to actually accommodate me? And when you think of me as a white person, what does that mean? And I'm also saying we are in a position now not to think about doing things, but let us effect whatever it is that we need to do. Because we have a tendency of deploying people that always think about doing things, and we embrace people when they are no more. The stats does not lie. We are losing people rapidly in South Africa. Those that are referred to as white and black. And people now are actually having this element of demystifying humanity. What does it mean to be a human being? It starts from ECD and pre-ECD. You'll find an infant, I normally, I do regular visits in these institutions of health. You find that a breastfeeding infant is hostile to the mother. The question is, where did she or he learn to actually decide to just try and chuck and chew the nipple instead of sucking the milk out of the breast? Now it means now it's becoming our DNA. And we need to be cautious of all these things that are culminating into fatalities.
Yes, for sure.
And now, in addition to this cyberbullying, professional people are more bullies than those that are not familiar with actually cyberbullying. They will use all these languages as if they're nice about them, about how they are presenting this. And when you interrogate, it's demeaning. You see? And nobody is monitoring the media space, the digital space. And I'm also saying this because now we're transiting into a digital space. We're forced, whether we like it or not. We no longer, I was saying one other time to some audience that I was addressing because I do motivational speaking. I deliberately went to a predominantly Caucasian school. Why do we still have schools that are predominantly that color? Why can't we have integrated schools across? Why can't I have my child comfortably, rubbing shoulders with you and not feel that they are beneath you?
No, they're not in the right space.
Did you get my point?
No.
I went on social media one time, if you were to follow my page, and said, "Now, by the way, I divorced 1998. I said, I just wanted people to have something to think about. I said, by the way, now I'm looking for a white male to be my partner." And then I said, hashtag, tell me how white is that male? You see?
Yeah.
The reason why I wanted to prompt this discussion was this: if you were to submit and say you are white and then qualify to be my partner, tell me how white you are.
True.
And what is it that makes you think you are white?
Sorry to interrupt you. Very, very interesting thoughts you're putting out there. I see Leon wants to add something to your viewpoints.
Yes, I would like to. What I addressed here today was child-on-child bullying, but that's not the only forms of bullying. Cyberbullying, teachers bullying children.
Yes.
It is horrific, and it happens in all schools,
Yes.
not only in some. And then you get children bullying teachers. So that's becoming a big problem because you cannot discipline the children as in the past. So you have to find new ways. And I think that's where the restorative justice process really helps, because it empowers the school to deal with conflict and disputes in a new way. It helps people to understand that there are alternative ways of dealing with problems.
True. I want to jump to JP because I see the time is almost done for us. Jane also mentioned mediation in the workplace, because it seems to me it comes from being a little child in the family, not having respect for each other, or being very unable to communicate or be helped properly, and it just flourishes at school, becoming a bully, and then it goes into the workplace.
No, absolutely. And even in the workplace, we assume that it's always the employer bullying the employees. And that's not true. I've personally experienced employees not only bullying their colleagues, but also becoming a bully towards the employer. So we have this bully culture for some reason. And it is really getting out of hand. It's like Leon says, at school level, and as Doc has mentioned, we are losing our kids. Kids are committing suicide because of being the victim of bullying. So I think also to answer one of the other questions, we need to educate. The question is, who's we? Because somebody has to start doing it, and we need to start our education process at ECD level, absolutely. Because we have adults working with kids, working with parents. So if we can start our education from a very early age, in terms of not only the fact that mediation is the better alternative dispute resolution to litigation, but to educate people to say, instead of killing each other, let's sit down and have a conversation. Because nothing is resolved when conversation ceases. And there are so many professionally trained mediators in South Africa, and not just locally trained, internationally trained, who can facilitate these conversations wherever. I have facilitated workplace mediation on the steps of the CCMA. And I mean, it's like the CCMA, if you look at when the CCMA was created, it's the Commission for Conciliation, which is peacemaking, mediation, and only then arbitration. So there's two processes even before we get to fighting it out in front of the commissioner. But who's the we, Doc? Who is going to educate South Africans from the cradle to the grave that we have an alternative?
Thank you very much. I think, unfortunately, I have to conclude here, and I think maybe the fighting people in the Ukraine and Russia should also need this Zoom recording. Thank you very, very much for your participation. There's a small gift to all of you to say thank you for coming and helping us. Thank you. Thank you very much, Advocate Zola. We will definitely take heart what you've contributed today. The same with you, JP, and your vast experience also in the labour market. Doctor, an unexpected guest, but thank you so much for your input, very valid, and encouraging us to start very small.
Thank you.
And soon.
Thank you very much.
And Leon, thank you so much. You've always been helping Pro Bono with its mediation. And I can just say that Pro Bono, we try and mediate not only with children, but with the families, labour, refugees, housing. Actually, all matters can be mediated. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow.
You have lots of really.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Yes.